Happy New Year everybody. Today I'm going to be doing two videos combined. I'm going to share with you my December wrap up, and I'm also going to talk about my reading goals for 2019 because despite having quite a lot of downtime in December, I didn't actually read that many books, so it just makes sense for me to combine the two videos into one. But first of all, let's kick off with talking about what I read in December. So the first book I read was Skyward, Claim the Stars by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first in, I want to say, a series of 4 books. It's a YA science fiction offering from Brandon Sanderson, and I was very excited to pick this up because I haven't read any Sanderson since the Mistborn trilogy, much to James's consternation because he has read every single thing the man has ever written and he's always going on at me to pick up more books. So when this came in a Fairy Loot box, I knew that I needed to pick it up. So we are following the story of a young girl called Spencer, who is a human, and she lives on a foreign planet, and the human population on this planet believe they are the last of their kind, and they are under constant attack from a species known as the Krell. So they are forced to live in caves underground on this barren planet. There is a pilot force called the DDF who defend the humans from the Krell, but really they're just surviving. They're not thriving on this planet, they are just surviving. And Spencer's dream her whole life has been to join the DDF, primarily because her father was shot down as a coward. There was a great battle when Spencer was younger, and it's believed that he turned and fled. And so he was shot down as a coward, and Spencer has grown up her whole life under this umbrella of being known as the coward's daughter, and she wants to prove everybody wrong. But because of her father's status, Spencer finds it really difficult to join the DDF, and so that is where the story begins. That's the story that we pick up, and we follow Spencer in this really strong coming of age story about her finding out who she is, as well as discovering more about the planet and the world that Brandon Sanderson has decided to create. Now, I am a huge Brandon Sanderson fan. I love his world structures, I love his writing style. This book, because it's a YA, is quite angsty, and I'm not usually a fan of angsty books, but I find that he hit the tone with Spencer just right, so I didn't mind it too much. And he is a master storyteller, there is no doubt about it. My only gripe with this book is that you spend the whole book knowing and feeling and sensing that something huge is coming. And if you've read any Brandon Sanderson before, then you'll know that he is the master at diversion and dropping bombs on you that you just had no idea were coming. So you kind of spend the whole time reading the book in suspense of this huge twist that you know is coming, and it does come, but it comes in the epilogue. And although I really enjoyed this book, and I think I gave it 4 or 4.5 stars, I knocked 0.5 of a star off simply because I got the impression personally that the story that Brandon Sanderson wanted to tell was the story that you get in the epilogue chapter and not in the whole build-up. So you spend the whole of this book building up, and then everything gets turned on its head, and the story that is going to unfold in the future books is something entirely different, I feel, from this book. So although this is a good book, it really is just an intro to a story and a wider world and a wider universe that he obviously wants to delve into and tell the story of. So I felt a little bit duped into reading what is essentially just an intro, and I really want to read the story that is revealed in the last chapter. I really do. So yeah, I knocked half a star off because I was feeling quite annoyed that I'd spent the whole time reading this book and really it's just nothing more than an introduction. Having said that, whenever the future books are released, I'm going to be totally there for them because I think they're going to be absolutely fantastic. And go into this book knowing that, and I think that you will enjoy it because he just has a way with words and with characters and with world building that is just phenomenal, and it's a really good book. The next book that I picked up was the Bookish Mama's choice for December, and that is One Day in December by Josie Silver. And I think that I'm going to fall into a minority here because This is not the type of book that I would normally pick up. I have occasionally delved into the world of fluffy romance books, but it's not my jam usually. But because December was such a busy month, I thought that a light, fluffy, easy to read book might just be the perfect thing. But I really didn't enjoy this book. I have seen lots of people praising this book on BookTube and Bookstagram and just social media in general. I've seen so many people say that they have read and love this book, but I just didn't buy it. So the premise is that we have a young girl whose name I have already forgotten. We have a young girl called Laurie who is coming home from work on the bus one day, and she looks out of the window and she sees a young man sitting at the bus stop, and their eyes meet and they have this instant connection, and then she spends the whole following year totally obsessed with finding this bus boy. And then she has the chance to meet him at a Christmas party, and from that point their stories kind of unfold and you get dual perspectives. So you get Laurie's perspective and you also get busboy Jack's perspective as they meet and fall apart and meet and fall apart, and it's kind of this drawn out love story. And my main issue with this book, I think, is that it feeds into this concept, which I have a personal big issue with, that there is only one right person for you in the world, and there's this ideal person out there for you, and you should keep on looking until you find that one person. And obviously I'm not saying that you should immediately settle, but I also don't believe that there is one soulmate for each of us, and that you should keep looking, and I just don't believe that there is one perfect partner out there, because people are not perfect. And I really struggle because at one point in the book Laurie meets a guy called Oscar, they fall in love, she marries him, and I was totally shipping their relationship. He is solid and dependable, and the way that Josie Silver has written their relationship seemed really natural and really right, but of course it didn't lend itself long term to her ultimate storyline. So then she immediately began to nitpick Oscar's character, and it just felt deliberate and flawed and wrong to me. And I almost feel like had she not brought Laurie and Oscar together, I'd almost have bought into the whole overarching love storyline a little bit more, but I didn't like the way that she destroyed their relationship to fit her purposes, and therefore create this wider sense of you could be perfectly happily married and then it could all just disintegrate into dust, and you're not even going to try because there's somebody better out there for you. And I hope that comes across in the right way, that I'm not saying that if you are in a bad relationship you should stay. I'm not saying that if someone is clearly not right for you that you should remain in a relationship, but I do feel like relationships take work, and I dislike storylines where that's just made out to be not true, that things should just be easy and there should be fireworks and it should just be like ah. And I realise that this is a fiction story, and that in fiction people like to read about perfection and fluffiness and just love in its purest form, but that's just not for me, unfortunately. I like the murky and the grey and the realistic and the not perfect. So I think that if you like kind of warm, cozy, fuzzy romances, then this probably is a great book, but it just wasn't my cup of tea at all, and yeah, I had some issues with it, unfortunately. The next book that I finished was an audiobook, and it was an Audible dramatisation of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. I had been planning to pick up the physical book copy of A Christmas Carol in December, but I realised that with all the things that I had going on, I wasn't going to have time, but I was going to be spending a lot of time driving to places, so I decided to download it. And Audible have done a few different dramatisations. I heard an advert on the radio the other day for a War of the Worlds one, and it's basically the story but told in a dramatisation form, and they have famous people voicing the different characters. So A Christmas Carol is narrated by Sir Derek Jacobi, and then it has famous actors and actresses doing the different voices of the characters, and this version was so so good. I really enjoyed it. I find Dickens' writing quite difficult to get into and often quite jarring, but that just was not the case with this version at all. I flew through it. I thought that it was done really well. I'm really excited to look at the other Audible exclusives that there are, because it was just a really enjoyable way of reading the book. I gave it 5 stars. I am aware that A Christmas Carol has its flaws as a story, but in terms of a reading or listening experience, that version, and I will link it down below. I realise it's after Christmas now, but if you were interested in the future, I will link it down below, because it was just really enjoyable. And yeah, 5 stars for me, definitely. In terms of audiobooks, I am also halfway through The Wizards of Once by Cressida Cowell. I started listening to this with Eli. We've got about an hour left, and we are also listening to Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban on Audible as well, which is narrated by Stephen Fry, and I've talked about the Audible versions of the Harry Potter books because I think that they are also excellent. So haven't quite finished those, and then I'm just also over halfway through A Storm of Swords, Steel and Snow, which is book 3 part 1 of A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. If you've watched my wrap-ups recently, you'll know that I'm doing a reread of these books. So as I said, I'm just over halfway through. I was hoping to have this finished by the end of December, and I'm very close, but not quite. So this is the 3rd book, so I can't really go into it, but if you're unfamiliar with A Song of Ice and Fire, or as it's more commonly known now, A Game of Thrones, this is a high fantasy. It's absolutely fantastic. It's really rich in both characters and plot, but very heavy on the characters. Each chapter is a different character's perspective, and you follow many different stories across many different time periods and time spans, and it's just fantastic. I've talked actually to a few people about this who've seen me reading it and asked me whether the books are worth reading because they've watched the TV show, and I would say that I know that James has struggled to read these books because he doesn't like the heavy character emphasis. He has read A Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, which I would say is super high fantasy, and really enjoyed that. So in terms of the fantasy element, I don't think that it would be too complex because the world setup is also quite similar to our own, but if you're not a fan of heavy character-driven novels, then I don't think that the books would necessarily tick the boxes for you. But yeah, I recommend it to everybody all the time because I just think that they are fantastic. I absolutely love getting lost in this world, and I'm looking forward to continuing my reread in 2019, which brings me neatly on to the second part of my video, which is my reading goals for 2019. So the reason I've decided to combine my wrap up and my reading goals is because my reading goals are super simple this year, probably not very exciting, so I'm sorry about that, but in a couple of weeks I'm going to release a video showing all my unread books, and really that feeds into what my main goal for this year is, and that is to read as many of my unread books as I can. I'm going to try not to buy many new books this year, and instead just to focus on the books that I've had on my shelves for a very long time, because I believe that I have got some absolute crackers on there, and I'm really excited about some of the books that I have, but I just seem to push them to one side to pick up books that I buy, or newer releases and things like that. And I want to really work hard this year to clear my TBR and yeah, focus on some of the older books that I've maybe put to one side and need to get on and read. As a family, we are aiming for 2019 to be a more intentional and simplistic year, and part of that is not just buying things all of the time. And although it will be very difficult for me to not buy books all the time, and I do have a few on pre-order, I'm going to try really hard to just focus on the books that I currently own. I also want to finish my reread of A Game of Thrones / Song of Ice and Fire. I want to finish the reread that I started of Harry Potter. I want to try and finish a whole bunch of series that I have started and then just not managed to get to the final few books. So yeah, that is my main reading goal, and I also really want to focus on reading again for pleasure. an enjoyment rather than because a book is really hyped. I've read a few books in the last year that I picked up because they were super hyped and I just didn't enjoy them. And I think that when you go into reading a book with a high expectation, that can often colour your reading experience, and I don't want that. I'd like to have some degree of separation and maybe just pick up a book because I fancy reading it that month. So I'll still do my seasonal TBRs. I'm still going to try and set myself some kind of structure, but on the whole I'm going to go back to mood reading. I'm going to go back to, well, not go back to, I'm going to just try and clear my huge TBR, and you will see when I upload the video of my unread books that it is a mammoth task. And there is a good reason why I have made the decision that I have made, because I just cannot continue to add books to my unread pile without doing something drastic. So that's pretty much it. As always, thank you for watching. Do let me know what you read in December, anything that you particularly loved. Let me know what your reading goals are for 2019. I would love to know. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please do subscribe if you aren't already. Don't forget to give me the thumbs up, leave me a comment, and I'll see you all soon.